Welcome back to a new episode of Relocate to Happiness podcast. In today's episode, I host Judy Oppenheim. Judy has a BA in psychology and an MBA in marketing. With over 20 years of experience in consumer insights, research, strategy, and product development, she has worked with major financial services, companies, and leading advertising and digital agencies. In 2019, Judy obtained her certification as a happiness trainer from Professor Tal Ben-Shahar's Happiness Studies Academy. She's actively involved in the Academy's education committee and a founding member of its business club. One of her special interests is the intersection of money and happiness. And this will be our talk today. Good morning, Judy. Good morning, New York.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for coming. I'm so excited about today's episode. I can't wait to start, actually. And I already made a little intro of about yourself, but I want to really go into, before we start talking about money and happiness, I want to talk a bit about your background and actually how, what led you to this amazing research on happiness and money. And what was your background?
So I have a BA in psychology and an MBA in marketing. And throughout my career, which has been, a couple of decades, has been many times I've worked at both banks and I've worked with ad agencies and digital agencies. And I worked at Chase and Citibank, so I did a lot of work in financial services there, of course. Mm-hmm. And then also across the agencies I worked at, I happened to, among the clients I've had a lot of financial services clients. So over the years, I've really learned a lot about, how people think about money, how they make decisions, like the challenges they have, how people decide what credit card, getting in credit card debt, investing, not wanting to sell losses when they have stocks. A lot of the, what you think about when you're planning retirement. So across the spectrum from just starting out with a checking account to retirement, I've just done a lot of projects with as I said, Citibank, Chase, American Express, Goldman Sachs, Ally Bank, worked in with a lot of clients. I've got a lot of, perspectives on that. And when I took Tal Ben-Shahar's Happiness Studies Academy course, one of the things that they talked about there was the study about money and happiness that Daniel Kahneman did. And he's the one who's famous for having won the Nobel Prize in economics.
I remember,
psychologist. And it said that, happiness doesn't increase above US income of $75,000 a year. And that didn't really, on the surface, it didn't seem right to me. So I actually went and looked into the study and dug deeper. And that's the original thing that got me started in dealing more about this whole topic of money and happiness. That was the starting off point.
So that's super interesting. So if I would say what sparked your interest was that to actually start the research about the relationship between money and happiness was actually that theory that intrigued you very much. Can I say that?
It didn't. Yeah, it didn't sound intrinsically right to me. Two, one of the things that, a theme I've been talking about a lot when I talk about research is that the press takes a study,
of course,
and they take one piece of it, and that's all people hear, and that's what gets publicized, and that what gets into the psyche of everybody, that, money doesn't increase with happiness above 75,000. But take a step back, the way researchers talk about happiness, they talk about it in two different ways. In terms of measuring it, they measure it in two different ways. One is happiness with your life overall, and the other is happiness in the moment. And in that study that was done, happiness with your life overall did increase as income went up, but that never got reported. What got reported was the in the moment happiness, which was, they would ask people, questions related to their emotions, like yesterday or when they called them. And, that can vary quite widely depending on the day or what's going on. So that never got reported properly. And then what happened was, you know, years later, there was another study that was done by a professor from Princeton,
Mm-hmm.
and that study found that both types of happiness increased above 75,000. But that study, even though it was a Princeton professor, it looked to me very legitimate, did not get a lot of press, did not like, was not enough to change people's thoughts about the $75,000. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that it should have been partly because you know, as time goes on, it was like he was using some new technology. He was using smartphones,
Mm-hmm.
and where you could ping people like really in the moment, not asking about yesterday, how did you feel, when you don't necessarily remember those different emotions. But he was doing it in the moment and in those different times. So he got many more readings for each person.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that seemed like a more legitimate. So that didn't end up causing people to really think about it until the two writers got together to try to figure out why did they get different findings.
Mm-hmm.
And when they did that, they found that it wasn't so much that happiness doesn't increase above 75,000, it was that unhappiness doesn't decrease as much when you go over 75,000. And so it was interesting, like going into more nuance of whether you were like how unhappy you were versus how happy you are. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times when we look at any of this research, you kind of need to look more deeply at it
Of
to
course.
really go beyond the headlines. And, you know, and one thing that I remember is there was a study that came, so this one is not related to money, but it was related to how do people interpret things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about meditation. And it kind of said, you know, meditation is bad for kids. And you're like, okay, this does not sound right. How can meditation be bad for kids? And if, again, if you looked more deeply, there were a lot of positive things, positive impacts of meditation on kids.
Mm-hmm.
But kids who already had like a troubled background, sometimes meditation would bring up all these emotions
Wow.
and that they didn't know how to handle. So the answer wasn't like throw out meditation for kids. It was like make sure you have some therapists available, make sure you have some support. So kids where it is bringing up these, you know, heavy emotions, have somebody to talk to about them. So anyway, I
That's
think, you know, for me, going deeper in some of this research and understanding like what's really going on and the nuances about them is an area that I've been passionate about.
to answer the first question to understand. So,
Uh,
okay, you touched a lot of like bombs there, a lot of details. We will go like deeper and deeper. One thing that I really
right.
want to say about the meditation is that my kids love like this is how they fall asleep and it calms them down. So I'm the proof that it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, you know, like people and in general journalists, they take like titles and then they kind of like exaggerate and they put like different wordings. And I think it's crazy how you can take, you know, a piece of a research and then, you know, you can change it in your favor. And, you know, at the end of the day, you just like you want to promote something or something else. And then, yeah, you just put it out there with what is convenient for you and what you want to promote. But we're going to go deep.
And I think
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, at
Yeah,
least
sure.
in the US, there's this idea if it bleeds, it leads. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you want the most dramatic thing. That's what you want to be talking about. So they'll pick something that they think is really dramatic or
Controversial. Yeah, yeah.
different. And then that's what they're going to lead with.
And sadly, I think it's not only in the US. I think
Right.
it's all over the world. You know, like media and getting eyeballs and getting as much as
Exactly.
a lot of traffic and a lot of clicks per title.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
let's talk happiness before because this is what
Okay.
we're here for, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I want to ask you first of all, how would you define happiness?
So I had the privilege of working with Tal Ben-Shahar on an education project 2 years ago. And one of the things we did, so I personally would define happiness. I support Tal Spire, you know, definition, which talks about whole person well-being. And
Mm-hmm.
the idea that, it's spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being, and that's where the acronym SPIRE comes from. And what we did when I was working on this project is go a little deeper to try to help make it easier for people to understand what these different things were. So we kind of created 15 sub-elements. I'm going to very quickly just touch on what those are. So for spiritual, it's mindfulness, and that can be meditation, as we said, or just in general, being mindful of what you're doing. And I think one of the themes that you'll see as we're going to continue discussing is mindfulness is so important in relation to money and happiness. Mindful what you're spending your money on, why you're doing it, what you're getting out of it. Mindfulness is going to be like a really important idea. Also, meaning and purpose is very important for all of us. And then understanding your strengths and leveraging your strengths. Because a lot of times, at least in the US, there's been a lot of focus on like, what are your weaknesses, and work on your weaknesses. And that can be important too, but it's just even more important to leverage your strengths and make the most of them. And then physical, there's an acronym called NEST: nutrition, exercise, sleep, and touch. And the T with touch is the one I was less familiar with, the importance of actual physical touch. And I think that's where someplace like Portugal is probably better at touch than in the US and, certain northern countries. But also rest and recovery, that, we talk about like stress is bad, but the newer research is like, stress in and of itself isn't bad. It's chronic stress when you're always stressed, and the importance of taking breaks during the day, taking a break during the week, on the weekends, going on vacations, even just going for a walk when you're working on something to get your mind off of it and come back to it. The importance of taking breaks is something, at least in the US, we don't do enough of. And I think, again, probably Portugal, you're better at that than we are in the US.
Taking a lot of breaks during the week, during the day, and a lot of holidays. No, I'm joking. Go ahead. Sorry.
Having holidays. I mean, one of the things we were, talking about is like which countries are happiest, or not necessarily happiest. I think that's not the good phrase, but come out happiest on the World Happiness Report, which is really about overall satisfaction with life, and Finland and the Scandinavian countries come out high. And one reason is because they have more of a social security net, like, education, at least in Finland, education is free, healthcare is free. You get a lot. Finland, you get like 38 days vacation days. Well, you have, unemployment insurance, something, if you get laid off, there's childcare support. So a lot of those things, make you happier. You don't have the stressors of worrying about money as much. You can focus on, on other things. I think that's, so should I continue with the?
Yeah. I don't want to stop you. I have like a lot of questions about. Okay. I wanted to ask you actually, how does this? You mentioned the countries and you mentioned the happiest countries. So my question would be, how does the relationship between money and happiness vary, across like different countries, different cultures?
Yeah, I think the general idea is that you need a certain amount of money in order to be happy, because otherwise you're just constantly being stressed about money, and you're constantly trying to figure out, and that's top of mind and a big stressor. Once you get beyond a certain level, the question is, I think another theme that I really want to emphasize is trade-offs and opportunity cost. So yes, having more money is nice, but what are you giving up to get that money? And if you're not, that's the really important thing to think about. So if you're working like really, really long hours, so you don't get to come home and have dinner with your family, or you don't have any energy at the end of the day to go to the gym, or you don't have time to plan fun things to do on the weekends, or any time to volunteer, it's really thinking about how much are you willing to give, invest in, to make that money, because you're giving up things. There's always a trade-off.
So like, with other words, what are the prices that you are paying in order to get this amount of money? And what are the
Right.
other, like you're using your health, you're losing the time with your family, the relationship, you don't have time to train. So if all the other,
Right.
like if you're having a lot of money, but all the other fields in your life are going down, it's not worthy. I like that.
Exactly. Exactly. And a lot of people, I had done some podcast on retirement, and, people who retire and are like their whole identity was in their work. And then, okay, so I'm retired, I'm whatever age, I have plenty of money, but, my health isn't any good. I don't have any friends. I don't have any hobbies. You know, that's not a good life. So you have to really think of it more holistically. And that's when Tal talks about whole person well-being is really important. And, I agree with the spire elements. And
Mm-hmm.
personally, I would also add to that, you also need the financial part of it. You
Mm-hmm.
have to have a certain level of financial comfort in order to be happy. So that's something that I personally would add to the
Mm-hmm.
spire elements.
Yeah, I
And
get it. I
that's,
think in one of his books about happiness no matter what, he talks about it, and
uh,
he said that he was actually asked a lot if why he doesn't add the financial well-being, and I think he said that he includes it in the spiritual, in the spire, because of the meaning, and he has like a whole theory about it. But you can ask him probably
yeah,
why.
I've had several
With
conversations on the topic. And he said, as you said, that many people have talked to him, including when he did his first book, one of the reviewers was
hmm
like, please, I think you should add money. And he from his perspective, it's more of a secondary thing.
hmm
But everybody, Tal says, do happiness your way. So,
Exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah.
but if I quickly finish
Yeah, sure. Go
the
ahead.
rest of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fire elements. So we talked about spiritual, physical. The third one is intellectual. And that's, a piece of it is being in a positive environment, both, the people you're with and literally the physical environment. So, you can't really tell so much, but like I'm wearing a colorful shirt that I really like, makes me happy. And um, color makes me happy. Plants, nature, like looking out on trees makes me happy. So being, Tal puts up like sayings that inspire him and pictures of teachers he's had that inspire him. So creating this physical environment is,
hmm
is really important. Being curious and open to things, curiosity,
Yeah.
something that just comes up so much around happiness. It's being, not being set in how things are, being curious about new things, about other things, about people,
So
being
asking
open to
questions.
new. Exactly. Asking questions. Don't just accept things. And then the idea of deep learning is another part of that, the intellectual. And that's especially important now where we're always on our cell phone, we're Googling things. Like our attention span is literally, they've done research getting smaller. So really building those like deep learning muscles is,
hmm
is really important. And then relational, the research has found that the number one, and you've probably heard this a million times, the number one most important thing related to happiness is relationships and having strong relationships. And again, that's what I was saying. If you're focusing too much on other things and you're enough on relationships, that's not a good balance.
hmm
And learning communication skills, learning how to communicate with people, having supportive relationships, people who love you and care about you and have your best interest at heart, but also loving yourself and caring about yourself and taking care of yourself is important. And kindness. And that when you're kind to people, they benefit and you benefit. Like you feel good and they feel good. That's a very important thing. And you get this nice upward spiral.
So
And
true.
then last, yeah, exactly. And the last one is emotional, learning how to manage your emotions. And in the past, there's been like this idea of like suppress your negative emotions, just, don't. But if you suppress them, they end up blowing up and coming out in ways that you don't want. So it's more important to feel those emotions. Why are you feeling those emotions? What can you do about those emotions? Not ruminating on negative emotions. And then equally important is cultivating positive emotions. So you want to like, okay, this was a good experience. How can I get more of that? What can I do to be even happier? What can I do that like will
To duplicate the event, like the experience.
Right, exactly, and get more of it. And and the last one is this idea of reframing, that you can look at something one way or you can look at it another way. And one of them, I think it's really important, is to try to give people the benefit of a doubt. If something happened, like okay, it could have been that they intentionally did whatever that hurt you, but it could be they didn't realize that it was a mistake. They had some other intention. So don't automatically go to the negative. And then also the idea of, like, when you have certain emotions, and this is the classic one that everybody talks about, if you're about to go speak, for example, or go perform on stage, you're going to have butterflies in your stomach, but you can either interpret them as, oh my God, I'm so scared and I'm not ready, etc., or you can say, I'm so excited. And if you interpret it as, I'm so excited, you're more likely to go out there and do a much better job.
Instead of repression the emotion, you're accepting it and you're turning it like in a positive thing.
Right, you're interpreting it in a positive way. So those are the 5 elements that he talks about, and the 15 sub-elements, and the idea of that they're very interconnected. You need a minimum amount of all of them. Some people need, like if you're an athlete, you need more, you're focused relatively more on that. If you're a professor, you're more intellectually focused, but we all need some of all of those. Mm-hmm. And that the more you have of each, they help you go into an upward spiral. And that, I think, is a really important idea. The better, you slept well, you're in a better mood, so you interact with people more positively, you're more creative, all those things interact with each other in a positive way. And as I said, I think the additional thing that I would add to that is the importance of, having some financial stability. Mm-hmm. So the idea that, can you sleep at night and not be worrying about your finances? Do you understand how they work? Do you have enough money for a 6-month emergency fund if something, terrible happened? Those kinds of things are real. Do you see a path to doing better financially in the future? Those are really important as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. To wrap up, I also talk a lot about Spire, so I don't know what to say first, right. But I really want to tell you one thing. Like, I agree that all the elements are interconnected, and I agree that we really have to touch all of them, because sometimes, like, my life like seems perfect connection, or like I feel super aligned, with my schedule, but I didn't have time to go to the gym, or I didn't have, I didn't have time to train. And it really affects my mood. Or I haven't slept good last night, and then I woke up early, and then like my whole mood is like affected by that. So I don't think we really understand like how each one of these elements, they play such an important role in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where being mindful and saying, oh, I'm not feeling so good. Why is that? Oh, yeah, I didn't get enough sleep last night. What can I do to get to bed earlier? What can I do to like get some exercise? And, that idea of you can't necessarily do everything amazingly well because we only have a certain amount of time. So what can you do to like quickly get, like I was saying, hit high impact interval training, like a 2-minute hit of exercise, or I like this idea of, I call it joy bundling, like trying to do multiple things that make me happy at once. So I live near a beautiful park, and if I go walk with a friend, I get the physical exercise of walking. I get the, tree benefits, tree bathing kind of benefits.
Yeah, the nature, yeah.
I get the social benefits of talking with the friend. And then I really like taking photos of flowers. So I'll bring my phone with me, and I'll take pictures of flowers as we're walking along. So it's like 4 things in one, like I do one thing, but I get 4 benefits from it. So that's another way to try to think about how you can combine things. Not always, so that was an easier example, but to the extent you can do some of those things.
That's a good one. I like it. Okay, so you know what? Let's go back now after Spire. Let's try to combine both of them, right? And let's go back to the financial well-being that is missing from the Spire. We have to remind Tal again. And the first question that comes to my mind is actually, how do you, what are the metrics? How do you actually measure happiness, like in this in the financial well-being? What are the
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I think, there isn't like, as far as I could, doing some quick research on that, some like the way they have like the ladder scale and the, some of those emotions, not the one obvious question. But as I was saying earlier, I think questions like I was looking at this thing called the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had a survey, and they were asking questions like, I could handle an unexpected expense. I'm just getting by financially. My finances control my life. And then questions like I mentioned before, I can sleep at night or I can't sleep at night. And questions about, in the US, they did this survey on financial literacy and asked people like 6 questions about like, do they know what compound interest is? Certain pretty basic questions. And they found like the literacy level in the US was shockingly low. And that that's one of the reasons people get into financial trouble is because they don't understand how finances work. It's not taught in schools. Parents don't necessarily teach their kids this, most parents.
Which reminds
Talking
me
about
that,
money.
sorry to interrupt you. So it reminds me, I think like 66% of the Americans, they don't have savings after retirement or something. Like they did a research lately.
Right. Yeah, let's see. There's like a shockingly high percent of money.
Of lack of money, I would say.
Lack of money, exactly. I'm just trying to find it if I can. No, it's not it's not, sorry, I have it somewhere else. I thought I had it here.
We can search the later.
Okay, but anyway,
I can add the links to
but
the.
it was, but it definitely was, a higher number than you would think. And, one of the things that led me to focusing on is the idea that there's a lot of focus when people are talking about money and happiness about how to spend your money to be happier. But I think, and one of the things I'm passionate about is the idea of, are we asking the right questions? And to me, that's not the right question. The first question should be, how can we help people save more? Because so many people, the stressor and what's causing their unhappiness, at least in the US, is not having enough money. So the first step is not, how should you spend your money? It's how can we help people save more money? And, how to increase savings. And once you do that and you have enough savings, then you can start worrying about how you're spending that money or what you're doing with that money.
But I think I saw another research that it was saying that the people that are actually spending on experiences and they're like spending more time during money are happier than the ones that they have a lot of money in savings. Am I right, or did I mix things?
Yeah, so I have not seen that particular study, but I would say that in general, another theme of everything is balance. Like, what is enough money? When, there's this idea of overspenders and underspenders. So, some people, spend too much money, and then some people don't spend enough money because.
So what's the secret?
Money,
tell me.
Yeah, and that's mindfulness. It's kind of saying, okay, how much, it's worth spending this money because I'm going to go on this special vacation with my family. We're going to have these amazing memories. We're going to really bond and connect. We'll be able to talk about this for years to come. Or, like one of my friends, when he got divorced years ago, he bought like this big screen TV because he wanted his kids to come with their friends and his be the house that they come to. And so you can invest in buying things or buying experiences that will lead to having stronger relationships. You can invest in a gym membership. You can invest in, if you have tons of money, a private chef who can cook really healthy meals for you. You can invest in a cleaning person because if you and your spouse are fighting over who's cleaning the toilet or who's washing the dishes, this way, you don't have to fight about it. You've hired somebody to do it, and then you have more time to spend with each other, with your friends, with your kids. So there are many ways that you can use money to increase your happiness. The question is, how much and for what. And also, like, you can spend time and go have a picnic for like a lot less money than going to some fancy restaurant. You're still spending time with people, you're still eating out, but one you could spend like 20 times more than the other, or 5 times more. So you can also have similar things, but still have
Like
the
with a
benefits
less budget, with a small, yeah.
with a smaller budget. So like one of my friends, when her brother was in medical school and was, going out on dates, she was like, be real about who you are and what you can afford, and, go for walks in the park, take someone out for pizza. Like, don't go into debt to be someone who you're not. And that's where people get in trouble, is where they're trying to portray a certain image, or, the whole we call it keep up with the
Yeah,
Joneses,
yeah, I know that one, yeah.
um, that's where you get in trouble. You get in trouble, and it's like, but you also, on the other hand, need a certain amount of things. Like, I get sort of frustrated when they say, buy experience instead of things. And and again, this is where I think you have to have more nuance and more deeper understanding. Like, if you have 10 pairs of black pants, that 11th pair of black pants or
Won't make any
shoes or
difference.
whatever,
Yeah.
how much is that going to increase your happiness? But if you don't have any, getting that, that one pair that you're going to wear all the time can give you a lot of value and a lot of pleasure. So, and, I use the example of, I have a couch. You need a couch. You don't need a couch, but many of us want to have a couch. And, it's something, I've had mine for over 10 years. I'm getting smaller amounts of value from it versus one amazing trip, but I'm getting that small amount of value over 10 plus years. And you want a couch, and we were talking about your physical environment. You want a nice physical environment. The question is, you could buy a couch, secondhand for $100, or you could buy one for $1,000, or you could buy a super fancy one for $10,000. What's the right balance for you, and how much are you going to use it and enjoy it? And being mindful, again, to pick one that you're going to like and use and enjoy, and not just make a quick decision. So
You were
again, trade-off.
trade-off.
Yes,
No, you were speaking, and you know what I was thinking from the beginning, the pyramid of Maslow. So you also mentioned the ad world at the beginning. So I think that if we don't have like those first levels, if we are not fulfilled like the first steps, you'll never be able to go high on top, and fulfill your needs. The highest one, if you don't have like the base, a house over your top, the money, the savings, everything.
right.
So this is
Exactly.
like the connotation that I got in my mind when you were speaking.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. And it's interesting. I was listening to there's something called Nudge Fest. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
It happened last week, and it's this behavioral economics festival that happens in the UK. And there's some Rory Sutherland, who works at Ogilvy as a senior person there, is the one that kind of leads it. And one of the things that I think that they were talking about is that advertising agencies learned about a lot of these ideas of behavioral economics and psychology and motivation many years ago. They just didn't have that behavioral economics framework, but learning those things. And, my first agency job, we were using like vals and hierarchies. We learned all those things and applied them, to marketing. And even, a lot of the advertising that you see these days, they will talk of, meditations in there, connection is in there. Like, they've picked up on these themes related to happiness and, have incorporated them.
And I want to go back for a second to your research. And if I would ask you, like just to mention like the key findings that you found there, just to put a little, I know that it's been a lot of stuff.
Right.
So so if you can just summarize like the key findings, and we go back. I mean, I'm sure that you touched a lot of them already, but like what were the main things, or what were the surprises? What was something that was like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't think about it.
Yeah, so I would say the one is, and this I guess is not surprising, but not something I had really thought that much about, is that money, having more money has the biggest impact on people who are poor. So increasing happiness when you don't have money, as you add money,
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna, just change the quality of their life so much more dramatically than, once you have a certain amount of money, it's not gonna have that
Mm-hmm.
big a difference. Um, the idea that can money increase happiness, that it's not a simple yes or no answer. It's about what you then do with the money. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can have more money, but if you use it, the classic thing people keep on saying is, oh, you buy a bigger yacht, or you buy a bigger house, or you buy a fancier car. Obviously, not obviously, but that's not going to make you happier. That's probably going to do the opposite. But if you use it for the things we were talking about, for experiences, for building relationships, investing in security, investing in having savings, maybe investing in your education, donating it to other people, helping other people, those are the kinds of things, investing in your health, investing in your intellectual well-being, those are the kinds of things where money will increase your happiness. So it's not just a yes or no, it depends on what you do with it. So I think that was an important idea. Um,
Fascinating, I would say.
and then, yeah, um, then the third thing we touched on already, that I think the conversation, about how to spend your money is the wrong conversation. It should be
Mm-hmm.
how to first help people save money was another one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that, we touched on some of these already, the idea that you can spend your money to be happier, and the different ways investing in um, the experience in relationships, etc. I think one of the most interesting things that, was people. So there's a guy from Freakonomics. Let me
Mm-hmm.
see if I can find his. Well, one is, I want to read you this quote from James Clear. You may be
Of course.
familiar with him from the book Atomic Habits. Yeah. So he says, I'm just going to read this quote. Real wealth is not about money. It's not having to go to meetings, not having to spend time with jerks, not being locked into status games, not feeling like you have to say yes, not worrying about others claiming your time and energy. Real wealth is about freedom.
I'm
And
loving
so
it.
I think that
So
that
true.
is really a different way and an important way to look about money. It gives you the freedom, like there's also these conversations that really, it gives you the freedom, in negative situations, to walk away from an abusive spouse, to walk away from a job that you hate. Like, I worked at one company that was very high stress, and one of the people in my group, her mother literally did say, I will pay you to quit this job because
What
what it's doing to you is so unhealthy for you. Um, and she had a mom who had the financial ability,
to do
to
it?
be able to do that. Um, and then also it gives you the ability to take advantage of opportunities. So, you can, some amazing trip comes up, you could do that trip. Or, they talk about like, um, now that at least in the US, I'm guessing in Europe as well, more like destination weddings.
Mm-hmm.
So your close friend is having a destination wedding, you can, afford to go there and keep those connections going. Or like for us, being able to go to the happiness studies retreats, they're kind of expensive. It's an investment in relationship building and intellectual growth, et cetera. You have the ability, the ability to do that. And let's see if I can find, this is a quote, another quote. I'll give you one more quote that I really liked.
I like that you
Um,
came so
this,
prepared with quotes and research and everything. I knew I got the right person with
yeah,
me.
yeah. So this is from Steve Levitt. I don't know if you've heard of him. So sorry, the phone's ringing. Let me decline. Um, this is Steve Levitt. He's the co-author of the book Freakonomics,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and so a lot around behavioral economics. So he, through that book and then other books, he became quite well off. And he said, what having money allowed me to do is unclutter my mind. I used to spend a lot of mental effort trying to get deals to save money. I was cheap. And eventually I found that the best thing about having some money is that it allowed me to be inattentive to details. And then he talks, so, like, you go to the supermarket and you're trying to find out, okay, which of these things is less expensive? Oh, this store is having a sale, I'll go over there. He doesn't have to spend so much time and energy on getting the best deal and the best price because, he has enough cushion that his time saving of not spending it on finding that stuff is a good trade-off for him. And he gives the example of when he goes when he travels and you're returning a rental car to the airport, he always used to stress out about, at least here, you had to fill up the car with gas or else you got a big surcharge for not returning it with the gas full. And he's like, you know what? I
Just
have enough money. I can just return it not full. And that saves him a lot of time and energy and stress. And, he can do that. And another one is the idea that a lot of times, as you get more money, you spend it on the things you spent when you didn't have as much money instead of changing the way you spend money and changing the way you think about money. So your thoughts about money ideally should be evolving as you have more of it, because you're not in the same situation. So those are some of the ideas.
Well, okay. So if I would go back to the 75K threshold, what's the final
Right.
conclusion? Is it like
So the final conclusion was that so they did that study, and then they did, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned, so this other Princeton professor did another
yeah, yeah.
study, and they got together and they realized that yes, happiness, both, overall satisfaction with life, they had both already found from each of their studies that satisfaction with life overall does keep on going up. And then they found that actually in the moment happiness does also keep on going up. But the difference with the nuance was that below 75,000, unhappy people got happier, and above 75,000, it didn't have as
It
big
didn't
an
have any
impact
effect.
for them. It didn't have any effect, but that effect wasn't as strong. So let me see if I can find the
And when
exact
you're
wording
searching, I
on
want to also address the hedonic adaptation. The
right.
does it have any role in?
Oh, so let's talk about that. I think that's really important also. That's another area that I'm very passionate about. So what they found so it's this thing called a collaboration study where people who each have different opinions get together. And
Yeah.
I think like an amazing thing that more and more that people are doing this. So what they found was what they called a ceiling effect for the Kahneman study, which was the original study, because a very high percent of people had already reported being happy. I think it was like over 80% of the people had reported happy. And so they said it should have been unhappiness goes down with increasing income, but not beyond 75,000. So, and that the flattening relates to unhappy people. So it's a nuance. And again, a lot of this research, it's looking at these nuances. And then from the Killingsworth study, like a really interesting finding when they were trying to go deeper into understanding it, he said that in the lower range of income, unhappy people gain more from increased income than happy people. But this flips in the higher range where happy people gain more from increased income. So some surprising findings when you kind of, go deeper into that in terms of, and in terms of hedonic adaptation, I think, one of the really interesting, so Adam, who was it? Adam Grant? Is that his name?
Adam Grant, yeah.
Yeah. So Adam Grant, like Tal was interviewing
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah.
So afterwards, he was very gracious and said, if you want to like send questions that you didn't get to ask. And I sent him a question about like, what's the best study you found on hedonic adaptation? And he sent me a link to this really good study. And one of the things they mentioned is that, we hear a lot about this idea that, the honeymoon period for marriages
Yeah.
is like 2 years. And beyond that, the happiness goes back to sort of adapts. But they went deeper and looking into it, and they found that actually the average kind of hides some other things that are going on, and that people who were unhappy before going into their marriage, that honeymoon period actually lasts longer and
Wow.
than
Okay.
the average, and that people who were happy going into their marriage, the hedonic period didn't last as long as average. And so,
Which reminds
it's
me of the
interesting.
lottery research with the same thing with the people that were like happy before getting before winning the lottery. After a while, they became to the remember the study.
Well, let's talk about that in a second,
Okay,
because
okay,
I do
sorry. Go
want to
ahead,
talk
go
about
ahead.
the lottery study.
Yeah.
But just to finish this, I think that there is this idea of like, you know, where are, the difference between where you're starting off from. Are you unhappy or are you unhappy, and how that affects things. Um, and in terms of, the lottery study, that was another one that got me interested because it just didn't inherently make sense to me that people who win the lottery, are not happier than people who are paraplegic. It just
Does
makes
make
sense
sense.
to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And then, so the same, and when you look at it, the base sizes are super small. It's like 22 people. It's very small numbers to be making these very sweeping generalizations about things. And again, this whole idea of whether you're looking at happiness with your life overall versus looking at happiness, with your life individually. So, and if you looked at the lottery winners, it said that the positive life changes that they had included financial security, easier retirement, decreased worries, increased leisure time. So,
So there were some good
um,
things there.
huge things. When you think about what's more important, that bigger picture, what's going on with your life, to me is the more important one. And also, the other thing to look at, as I said, is looking a little closer at what measures are they using. So, what did they use to measure positive emotions? It was talking with a friend, receiving a compliment, reading a magazine, and eating breakfast. Like, those seem kind of strange to me,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like from the beginning, they just
unusual,
like, yeah, I get it.
like an unusual combination of things. And then if you look at, and then there was another study that was done that was much, relatively larger in Germany with, I think it was 166 households. So relative compared to 22, that's, a much bigger sample size. Um, and they asked, and they said in the year or two following the win, satisfaction with life increases. Um, and satisfaction with their income increases even more. And so that's really important. So I think some of these studies that get put out there, minimize the importance of money and of and hedonic adaptation, because they're only looking at that in the moment happiness, and sometimes they're only looking at small sizes. And a lot of, one of the challenges with a lot of the research that gets done in general in the social sciences is that a lot of times it's college professors doing it on college campuses with college students
Yeah,
with small samples.
exactly. Not
And,
biased at all.
right. And a lot of it in the US.
Yeah,
So, you've got, you kind of go this
yeah,
small
yeah, 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 yeah. The results are
so
also the same when you get like a very small sample like specific, like what we're expecting to, which results we're expecting to get. When you,
right. So it's in general, it's like being careful about how you read research and how you interpret it, and what you take away from it, I guess, is probably the bigger theme here in terms of, advice to people when they look at things. And I think also, like, to also use common sense. Does this kind of seem right? And why not? And therefore, maybe take a closer, a closer look at it. And maybe there's some nuance that's really in there that you should be paying attention to.
yeah, and I know that you're very passionate about, when doing research. Actually, I think I attended one of your webinars in how you're explaining how to actually do this research correctly. So it's a
Right. And,
it's something that you
even
like.
like my very first job was at a research company, And one of the things that they really, put in my head is like, simple things like the way you word something can have a big impact on how people respond. The order of questions can have a big impact. Very small things can have and influence people and have an impact on people.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, like, here you don't, have the luxury of doing that. But when I have the option and I'm doing, say, a survey, I like to include some open-ended questions, because then you get some deeper understanding of what led to the answers that you're getting. And sometimes just one quote will just open up this whole new way of thinking about things, or
Mm-hmm.
it's not, um, like I did something on a project on gaming,
Mm-hmm.
and going in, I really wasn't that familiar with gaming, and the kids doing gaming, and I kind of had this going in assumption that it's very lonely kids and it's a lonely environment, etc. And they were saying, no, it's actually the opposite, because we play games with other people online and we're interacting with other people, and it's actually much more active than watching television or watching a
Mm-hmm.
video.
By
And it
themselves,
kind of
yeah.
changed my whole mindset
Mm-hmm.
of that whole category.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it when those kinds of things happen, when you're thinking a certain way, and then, oh, it's actually,
It's not
more
the way I thought.
different than that, or yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get it. You were talking about companies you mentioned now, and I wanted to ask you, like, how would companies, what would they use, what they could use from your research to make their
Uh,
employees or their people happier in terms of
yeah, I
money?
mean, I think one thing that a lot of research has found is that, like, bonuses and salary are important, but not as important as people think, and not as important at the edges. And the importance of a lot of these spire elements,
Mm-hmm.
like, a lot of the research has been, the importance of having a good friend at work is really important. But and so, and giving people opportunities to build relationships. Like, I used to work at a company, and they called it like a horizontal football field, like, what was it? A horizontal skyscraper, because each floor was like the size of a football field. It was really big. And
Well,
they purposely put like the bathrooms at either end, and they put like the coffee bar and where you could get food in the middle, because they wanted to maximize people interacting with each other and randomly like bumping into each other. And getting those interactions and those connections with people. So I think you can, and they also set it up so like desks could go up and down, and they had plants, they had pictures on the walls to just kind of, increase the happiness. But in terms of money, I think one thing that they can do is kind of um, realize, one, that that's not the most critical thing for
mm-hmm.
people, that there are other things that are important, but also, like, in terms of, at least here in the US, helping people become more financially literate, helping people, like here, one of the most successful behavioral economics nudges that have been done is automatically signing up people for retirement accounts when they started a company, and automatically increasing the percent that they save when they start. So taking away the friction of saving and making it easier to make those decisions and get started. So that's a benefit that they can make for people's, long-term happiness. I just wanted to see if there was anything else. Um,
You have your research there, right?
yeah,
you have all
I was like
you
getting
you have
ready
all the
for,
notes.
yes, I was doing that. So I wanted to just check, because I was thinking that sometimes in the moment, you don't realize it. But anyway, those are some of the
These are the
ideas
mains.
that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
thinking.
yeah. You were talking now about like interaction, and in my mind, I get a lot of correlations. So you know what I was thinking, like gratitude slash appreciation, contentment, all this stuff that you are actually, all the
Uh,
positive emotions that we were talking about in the Spire model. Like, how much does it help? The satisfaction of of money, of like appreciating money and all this stuff, like how important are these emotions in actually being happy in your relationship with money?
So what's been really fascinating is the research that found like the happier you are, actually the more successful you are, that it goes that direction, not the other direction. It's not that the more successful you are, the happier you become. It's that if you're happier already, you're more likely to then become successful, because if you have good relationships, if you have your life more in balance, if you do the intellectual stimulation, if you have good health, all those things, if you have friends at work, you're more likely, if you're into deep learning, you're more likely to be doing a good job at work and be successful at work. So I think that's been really interesting, which direction it goes.
Mm-hmm. I get it. And I want to go back again also. I'm not satisfied with the answer about the cultures and the countries and, the relationship with the money and, in different environments. Because as I told you, like I was born in Romania and then I moved to Israel and now I live in Portugal. We were also in Spain for a while, but I was traveling a lot. And I could, like it's such a big difference between the way that people, in Romania, it's like it's a very weird subject. You don't talk about money, you don't talk about how much money and you're not asking the other ones.
Right.
On the other hand, you go to Israel and it's just crazy, like the taxi driver can ask you, which actually happened to me. It's like, oh, there's a very nice condominium. Did you guys rent or you bought here like an apartment? It's like, who are you? Like, why are you asking me this? True story.
Yes.
So they ask you everything, in Israel, how much money you're making, how much money you're paying for the house, how much money you're paying for the rent, how much, like everything, like it's not an issue. In Portugal, it's also like a different relationship. So anyway, my question, going back and wrapping it up, it's like how much does it vary this the relationship between money and happiness in different cultures and different countries?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question. And, I don't know if you saw the presentation I gave on the World Happiness Report and the different,
I'm not sure. I don't.
yeah. But anyway, there were a lot of questions about the World Happiness Report, especially when Israel came out like number 5, on that index, and everyone's like, how does Israel come out so high? And and one of the answers is that because it has, it's different combinations of things than what Finland has. Israel has very tight family connections. It's a small country, so people going home for dinner on Friday night is a tradition that many families have, where they they connect, and there's that connection, and you're expected to be staying close with your family, which is very different from from in the US. There's also a sense of purpose, like most people go into the army and serve in the army, and they're this idea of doing something bigger than yourself and a bigger
patriotic,
purpose.
yeah.
And being patriotic, and also being in the army teaches you discipline and looking at the big, putting the community first. And Israel's also, even before the army, it's very community oriented, very family oriented, very community oriented. That's very important. I think that if you think about weather, I think, weather helps too. Like it's, generally a sunnier place. For a lot of people, you're not too far from the water. Those are some of the benefits. But that sense of you have people to rely on, you have community, you have tight family. I also think that there's like less of a hierarchical culture there. You can, talk to people, there's a sense of anyone can have an opinion. So people, you know, there's a very high percent of people who are entrepreneurs, and because there's a sense of confidence and anyone can talk to anyone can have a good idea. I think, so those are some of the reasons. And there's an amazing book called The Genius of Israel that, they always make titles to sell books, but the first chapter really talks about why Israel does well in the World Happiness Report and why it's an outlier in terms of relatively, first world countries that are not having some of the challenges like that the US is having and Western Europe countries are having. So it's a really fascinating book. If anyone has a chance to read it, I definitely would recommend it.
I will definitely look into it.
Yeah. So, and then if you look at, the other thing that comes up a lot is like, well, Latin American countries, people seem so much happier. And, I think, So again, it's like, what are you measuring? And depending on which study you look at and what the measurements are, different countries will come up higher. Like Costa Rica comes up higher on certain ones. There's one called the like the planet, Bhutan has their National Happiness Index. There's the Happy Planet Index. And
I think
for
Costa Rica
that
was
one,
also one of the blue zones countries.
it might be one of the blue zone countries.
Yeah,
I
like a
forget
place
which.
area, yeah.
Yeah, it's right. I think it is. And just another aside, for anyone who has Apple TV, or you can subscribe just for a month and check it out. There's a TV show called The Reluctant Traveler with Eugene Levy.
Mm-hmm.
And each episode he goes to a different country. And the first one is Finland, the second one is Costa Rica. And in those, he specifically was talking about happiness. And in the other ones, he also talks about like what's their philosophy of life. And a lot of times, it's a more laid back, it's a more community, it's a more family oriented, it's a more nature oriented. Like it's more rest and renewal. If you watch these different episodes, a lot of the themes that we're talking about come out in terms of, and he actually goes to Lisbon,
Ah, he does?
and
So the
yeah,
Reluctant, what's the on
the
app
reluctant
Traveler?
traveler.
Where is it? On app
It's on Apple TV.
on Apple TV. Okay,
I
okay.
don't know if you have access to that or
Yeah, yeah,
not,
yeah.
but okay. So again, you can subscribe just for a month. Check it out. It's really good. But if you look at the what's this one called? The Happy Planet Index, Costa Rica is number one.
Mm-hmm.
And Ecuador is like number 5, Panama is number 6. So, you get more of the Latin America kind of countries.
Mm-hmm.
And then the um, OECD countries. So depending on what you measure, you're going to get different countries coming out highest and lowest. The World
Mm-hmm.
Happiness Report is the one that has gotten all the press and is famous, and they chose certain things. But again, depending on what you choose, you're going to get different results.
Mm-hmm.
And even like there was this happiness symposium, leadership happiness symposium at Harvard like 2 weeks ago,
Yeah, uh-huh. I
and
saw
somebody
something. Yeah.
was showing that if you look at that ladder scale, overall satisfaction, certain countries, these countries come out. If you look at positive emotions, another country, a couple of countries, if you look at minimum of negative emotions in other countries. So depending on what you're asking, different countries, are going to come up to the top.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think there are some overall themes that, make a country happier. And, it's interesting. One of my friends just came back from Lisbon and on vacation in Lisbon in that area. And she said to me, I felt like I could breathe more. I felt less stress. It just feels like a more laid back, happier place. And
It's
that was
true.
totally unprompted to me or anything. And I think, and like many years ago, I went to Iceland, and I remember like going to, is it Reykjavik how you pronounce it? And going, oh my God, you can see the sky. The air just feels differently. There's so
Mm-hmm.
much space, so much quieter. Just some of the things that we appreciate, and some of the challenges. So, there are different combinations that make countries, but I do think that we were talking originally about Finland and having like some kind of like financial cushion,
Mm-hmm.
social, that supports people, that takes away a lot of the stress. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I had started years ago watching Korean television, and one thing, like, and everything was new and different to me when I started doing it, was that so many of the like the episodes were about like people getting into medical debt. Like somebody got ill in the family, and then all of a sudden, they have this huge debt and they're in big trouble, and how are they going to get the money? Because I guess at the time there wasn't much, in terms of, health insurance there. I don't know the details, but that was a theme of a huge worry theme
Mm-hmm.
that seemed to be happening in that culture. Um, and here too, like, health insurance and paying medical bills is a big issue that you don't have in some other countries.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
You know, including Israel has better, health insurance policies.
Yeah. I know. I've been there, and the public services, like the public health system, is it's very good. I always say, I gave birth in a public hospital. I went to the public hospital. It just like it was such a. It's very accessible. How do you say? You have access,
Acceptable.
like acceptable, and like yeah. You get a lot of. How do you say? It's very. Everybody can afford it. It's very affordable.
Comprehensive.
Yeah.
It's yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when you think about what are the things, like at least in the US, the things people worry about are, healthcare. They worry about, college, paying for college, and they worry about retirement, paying for
It's true.
retirement. Those are like three big stressors here.
I will never understand this health system in the US. I really don't get it. Like, how come a country that is so rich cannot afford to have like a better healthcare for the people? It's just beyond my understanding for years.
Yeah, there are definitely challenges here as well as other countries. But yes, I 100% agree with you.
There's no perfect place. One last question to wrap it up about your research. If somebody wants to get like more details, how they can find you, how they can read more stuff, tell me, give me like a final conclusion of our talk.
Okay, so basically, most of the research I've been doing, I've been sharing, privately within the Happiness Studies Academy, so it's not really accessible to the public. I will, give you 3 links that you can add in the show notes.
Perfect,
to podcasts that I was interviewed for related to money and happiness, and one, the education project related to the education project I did with Tal. I'll also give you my LinkedIn profile, and if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I'd love to, connect.
And to ask you more questions.
Right, ask more questions, share ideas, discuss, potential opportunities to partner. That would be great. But I don't have a big profile out there at the moment.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing with us all your knowledge and all the facts that I don't know, it's just like I could literally stay with you till the morning and ask you more and more stuff. It's just like every single thing that you're talking about, it has like another, like I would ask another 10 questions. So
that's true.
Yes, it's very, very true. So thank you so much again for taking the time. And I hope you're going to come again and, bring us more like some news.
Okay, well, when I have some new things to talk about, I will be in touch. And thank you so much for reaching out to have this meeting and get together. I really enjoyed it. And it's always fun to share with other people. So thank you again.
Thank you.